Good morning, everybody. I still see smiling faces in the audience, so that means that you didn't get shit-faced yesterday, which is always a good thing. Talking about keep being shit-faced and having an attack hit your system at the same time once you've been out in a conference, for example, we're going to discuss the incident response services today. And incident response services are here specifically because of the reasons what we discussed yesterday. That a lot of the attacks we're currently seeing out there in the world are very different to the ones that we used to have in the past. It's not enough to drop a malware anymore into the system and call it a day. The attackers are actually doing, for example, using your own tools that you have in your systems to do malicious activities in the system. And those activities are really hard to not only detect, which is why we have the MDR, but also then respond to and make sure that the attacker is not in the system anymore once the incident itself has been resolved. And it really boils down to a lot of issues that people have in the companies related to incident response. So nobody is really monitoring things. They're not necessarily effective at remediating those, doing anything at them. Meaning that even if somebody would be looking at it and something happens, they don't necessarily know what to do and they need help. And like yesterday, these discussions usually begins from our customers with statement like, once we realized we had an issue, there was nobody to help. And usually that is the case that you are in a conference, for example, like this, you've been drinking a few days straight, you're not quite out there, and during the night, the last day, somebody got into your system, nobody did anything about it, and then suddenly you have your colleague calling you, hey, we have an issue and things are down, what do we do? I need help, panic, and then everything, or essentially hell breaks loose, right? And specifically for that reason, I'm always going back to the NIS2 because the NIS2 directive is really good at setting up a very basic framework of the things that you actually need to do. And I always refer back to the 10 minimum requirements of the NIS2 framework, specifically in the context of MDR and incident response. The article 21.2 B and C, of which the B is the ability to handle and detect cybersecurity incidents. And if you don't have your internal people to handle those incidents, how can you do this? The same thing, if you don't have people internally who can do these kinds of things, or actually be effective in ensuring that your business continues, then can you actually manage an incident without big damage to your company? And the answer, generally speaking, is no. You need help for these kinds of things, and that's why we have the WithSecure Incident Response Service. Now, from my perspective, the WithSecure Incident Response Service is a little bit like an insurance-like service. And don't get me wrong, this is not a preventative service. So this is not a service you buy in order to prevent from something happening. This is a service that you have in your back pocket that when, pardon my language, when shit hits the fan and you really have an issue and you have nobody to help you, you have this insurance-like service in your back pocket. You have the phone number, you can call them, and within an agreed SLA, you are guaranteed to get the resources who will help you in managing that incident and making sure that it doesn't impact your business continuity. That's really the bottom line of the incident response services. So these are the guys that if you have an incident and you don't know what to do and you cannot manage it, call us, we will come and help. We're kind of like the knights in shining armor who will come and help and make sure that things doesn't escalate too badly and the business, like I said, can still run. When we talk about a retainer, there's usually a couple of concepts that come up. First is the walk-in and the second thing is the retainer. The retainer is essentially the contract that you do with us, that you pre-negotiate with us, where you agree and you pay for a service where we guarantee an SLA. We guarantee you access to the specific needed resources that are needed in order to manage and secure your system. You also get discounted day rates on those because we have a contract, we have pre-negotiated those. And because we have the contract, we can actually move immediately. And this is usually one of the big things when it comes to a retainer, specifically for those people who are actually owning the finances of these kinds of things. Because when you do not need to negotiate under attack, which is what happens in walk-in, you are already in a panic, things are going down, things are burning, you are not necessarily thinking very straight, you might have been awake for 2 nights straight, and then you have a company who comes in and says, hey, we can fix everything, here's the silver bullet, but the price tag for that is prohibitively expensive. But you need to pay it anyway, because at the moment, you don't have a chance. There's nothing you can do, the incident is already ongoing. So that's why the retainer also makes quite a bit of sense from the financial perspective and from the risk management perspective, that your, for example, CFO is very likely to be interested in as well. Because when you go into a retainer, you can actually negotiate, you can agree, you can make the contracts in peace, so that if there is an incident, you are already prepared for it, as opposed to that you need to, at the heat of the moment, try to do something, cobble things together and pay for really, really expensive services, because the guys you are buying those services from, they know that you do not have an option of not paying less. Obviously, being a walk-in customer, essentially, you call us and you hope for the best, that we have the resources to help you. It's also not a very, how to put it, a safe mode of operating, because we have seen many times in the market these situations, and Log4j is something that we've discussed here today with many of you earlier, that when these industry-wide incidents happen, or even not a whole industry-wide, but for very popular vendors, for example, there's a big incident, suddenly there's a huge uptake in various kinds of security incidents. And in those cases, all those companies that do not have a retainer, generally speaking, cannot get any help from the incident response vendors, because all the resources are already bespoken for those customers who took a retainer. So it is a little bit of a risky thing to assume that, if things go bad, there will be somebody to help me, because that is most definitely not always the case. So definitely, there's quite a bit of benefit in thinking the differences between, do you want to be a walk-in, essentially take the risk of not getting help when you need it, or do you want to go towards a retainer where you know that you have a SLA-backed guaranteed access to resources when you have an incident? At least myself, I would sleep much better at night whenever I would have an incident response team in my back pocket when needed. Now, incident response is relatively complex topic. The incidents always depend on the customer environment and what happens in there, and how you have set up your infrastructure, who is the attacker, what they have managed to do, and what are your own available resources at the time when the incident happens. But generally speaking, what you see now on the screen is the SANS IR lifecycle framework. There is obviously a NIST version of this as well, which we can follow if that is the one that you prefer to use. But essentially, how we split our incident response service is that we have the first response part, which is a pre-priced, pre-packaged set, where we really focus on the most important thing, which is the identification of the threat and the ability to contain it so that it doesn't expand in the environment. And this is really much related to what I said here on the stage yesterday, where the notion that the cost of a cybersecurity incident is much lower when contained within the first 72 hours of the detection, as opposed to letting it go further. And this is specifically where the first response part of the incident response services is focused on. Majority of the incidents can be handled within the first response, including the identification and containment. But then if there are more steps needed, or more information or more actions needed to fully resolve the incident, for example, provide very custom reporting to an insurance company so that you can get the money back for the security incident, then we can help on those as well, as per the SANS or NIST frameworks that you can see on the screen. I'm happy to elaborate more on this on the demo booth as well. We have multiple specialists in there, including some of our IR team leads, who have been present in some of the most complex nation-state attacker cases over the years. And they can tell you really, really cool war stories from the trenches, what they have seen, what they have defended against, and what they did in order to keep the customers' business continuity up and running. Now, obviously, these guys are not alone. Like I said yesterday, a lot of these guys are supported by a lot of security consultants, researchers, threat intel analysts. So these are the kind of guys that when they do the incident response into your system, they can plug into a lot of the different kinds of other units and disciplines that we have in the company in order to make sure that the resolution and the identification and whatever is needed to be done in order to fully close and resolve the incident are done, and that we have the right specialists to do that. Now, from the retainer perspective, we offer two kinds of retainer services. First is a customer-specific retainer. Essentially, that is for those customers who do not want to share resources. They want to have their own dedicated retainer only for them. And this is usually for companies that operate in the field of aerospace, military, banking, healthcare, and so forth. And then now we have heard our partner channel and the feedback that you guys have provided us, and you have wanted us to bring a partner-wide version of the incident response retainer, so that in case any of your customers that you are serving has an incident, you are guaranteed to have the same benefits that the customer-specific retainer, essentially the SLA-backed guaranteed access to those needed resources to manage the incident in your customer premise. And obviously this is quite of an important thing for you as well, because when your customer has an incident, especially if you're managing their environment or their infrastructure, or you're otherwise deeply integrated into their whole ecosystem, the fact that there is an incident is already reflecting kind of badly on you, but then if you cannot help them resolving the incident either, it is kind of a conundrum as well. So that's why I have already discussed today with many of you about the partner-wide retainer, which we have released yesterday as well. And if you want to hear more about it and the specifics for the partner channel, I welcome you to the demo booth as well, and we can discuss the details in there. With this, I thank you for the attention, and thank you.